there's a lot of countries, not like a few, there's tons of countries where if you go outside of their parliament or their main political place and you start like shouting about how much you hate or you dislike or you whatever the president or the leader or the administration, within minutes you're, if not being beaten or shot, you're gonna be locked away, right? It's like people have the freedom to really say actually whatever they want and to have dissent and to have debate and things like that. And people take that for granted because they don't generally understand that you can't do that everywhere.
Yeah, fascists don't support your right to call them a fascist.
No, exactly.
What's up, guys? I'm Zach, your host of the Auxoro podcast, where we bring you face-to-face with music artists, athletes, entrepreneurs, doctors, designers, and other interesting humans in a show that dives deep into the story beyond the surface. You can now support Auxoro with a donation on Patreon, PayPal, or Venmo. We're a completely independent platform with no outside sponsors or investors, and we're grateful for any amount, no matter how small, to help push the conversation forward. If you'd like to support, you can visit patreon.com/Auxoro, link in the podcast description as well. On Patreon, you get early access to episodes, discounts on merchandise, and other Patreon exclusive content. Thank you for your support. If you love keeping up with Auxoro, we have a newsletter sent out twice a month with all of our latest content, as well as other articles, podcasts, books, and advice that we find helpful. I'm constantly scrounging the internet for things to improve my life, and I would love nothing more than to be able to share the things that have helped me with you. Go to auxoro.com and join over 1,000 others by subscribing to the newsletter. The link is also in the podcast description. This episode is brought to you by The Aux. The Aux is a short-form podcast produced by Auxoro, bringing you a daily dose of uncensored wisdom to jumpstart your life. 10 minutes or less, no bullshit, no topic off limits. We explore topics like fashion, porn, relationships, meditation, and more. You can subscribe to this podcast by searching The Aux, AUX, wherever you listen to podcasts. This time, we sat down with Zuby, a rapper, author, speaker, Oxford graduate, and host of his own podcast called Real Talk with Zuby. On this episode, we discuss his travels across the US, Kanye West, the culture war in America and the UK, building a following on Twitter, his journey through fitness, and more. Without further ado, please enjoy this wide-ranging conversation with Zuby. How has it been so far since you've been in America? Because you've been all over the place, and I've seen you've been changing your Twitter handle strategically to reflect where you are in the United States so people can follow you, which I like. I think that's a great idea. How has it been being able to meet all these different people in different cities and getting all those perspectives in such a concentrated period of time?
It's been amazing, man. I feel truly blessed and grateful for it all. To have so many opportunities to go to so many places that I've never been to before, meet so many people I've never met before, have so many great opportunities to go on some of the biggest podcasts, do some of the biggest interviews, go on the biggest shows in the world. And, you know, from where things were at the beginning of the year, I started this year out not really knowing what my exact plans for the year were. I knew I wanted to release a new album at the beginning of the year, but so much stuff that has happened and, you know, sort of transpired in the past 6 months, I could not have predicted at the beginning of the year. So it's been fun. I mean, every single city I've been to has been really different. So I've been to, I think, 9 or 10 different cities now. They've all got a really different vibe, different feel, different types of people, different weather, different everything. So I've been to the States multiple times before, but normally just visiting one place and staying there for a couple of days or maybe a week. But this time around, you know, I've been here for 2 months and really gotten to see a lot of it and meet a lot of people. And it's given me a whole different perspective, and also a realization of the positive impact that I'm having on people now on a global level, right? As an artist based in the UK and whose career has primarily been in the UK, it's been interesting. I mean, it's one thing to see the numbers going up online on social media and seeing, okay, you've got this many followers in the USA or this many followers here or there. It's another one to be out there in the real world and to have people recognize you on the street or
in the Pentagon,
in the
White House.
Yeah. Just be in places where you're not expecting people to know who you are or to recognize you or anything. And yeah, just having both online and offline people telling you like, man, I love what you're doing. I love what you're saying. I love this interview. I love that song. I love that podcast you did. And yeah, I'm just really feeling the love. I mean, in multiple cities I've been to now, I'm currently planning to do one tomorrow night while I'm here in New York. I started this thing of just doing meetups with my Twitter followers.
Yeah, I saw the photos from that online.
Yeah, and it's been amazing. I mean, the first one was in San Francisco, where I didn't necessarily even know I had that many followers or anything, but I was literally just hungry. It was like 6 p.m. and I was like, oh, I'm hungry. Does anyone around San Francisco want to go get dinner? Come 7:30, I'm there just having dinner with a bunch of people who just saw that on Twitter and kind of DM'd me and came through and everything. Then I did the same thing in Atlanta, in Nashville, in DC. And yeah, it's just been great having those conversations, meeting so many cool, unique people. And just having a little more time to, Twitter is one thing, but nothing ever beats the real world. Nothing beats meeting people in person and being able to sit there and talk to them, look them in the eyes, and just, get a better understanding of where people are coming from.
That has to be a rush to be able to connect with that many people at once, to tweet out a location and say, hey, I'm going to grab dinner here, or hey, can anyone get me into the White House or the Pentagon, which we were talking about before we started recording. And also being able to travel across America, because most people when they're traveling, usually they'll go to one spot and then go back to their home base. And you've been going to all these different locations across the US. And it has to, I imagine it has to feel like you're going to 6 or 7 different countries in the same trip, because that's pretty much what the US is. You can fly 1 hour and, like you said, get to different weather, completely different perspective of people. You could drive an hour and be like in the middle of nowhere in upstate in New York if you really wanted to drive a couple hours. But it's a cool place to do what you're doing because it's so expansive and it's so, there's so much reach, and I'm sure connecting with people has also fed into what you're doing as well, and like giving you the drive to reach even more people, kind of like feeds off of each other.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's encouraging because whether it's through my music or my podcast or the interviews I do, any kind of work I do, it's always hard to know and gauge how many people you're really reaching and what kind of influence and impact it's having. It's something all musicians deal with, right? You make a song and you kind of put it out there, and you make an album, you put it out there. You can see, okay, cool, 100,000 people watched the music video on YouTube. 40,000 people have streamed the song on Spotify or whatever. And that scale, it's easy to lose what that means, right? If you think 100,000 people, like in this weird internet era, to some people, that doesn't sound like a lot. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like 100. But if you've ever seen what 100,000 people actually looks like, I mean, that's a town. That's like an entire town of people who watched your video online or listened to your podcast or saw your interviewers. Like that's a lot of people.
I had the same exact conversation with a singer-songwriter from New Zealand. This was about 3 months ago when she was visiting the US, and I actually had her on the podcast last year. And I started out strictly interviewing music artists and then branched out into other fields. And she said she was going through a period of time where she was considering quitting. She's quitting music for good, getting 9 to 5. Nothing wrong with that. That's respectable if that's what you want to do. A lot of people do that. And she said she felt like no one was listening. And I was looking through her Spotify page, and the top page had top song had 8 million listeners. Her second one had 4 million, 5 million, something like that. And that's an entire city. That's multiple cities of people listening to a single song. Yeah. But in the environment we're in these days, where a lot of
how many people live in New Zealand? That's more than the population of New Zealand, isn't it?
It's got to be, what, a few 100,000 people in New Zealand?
I think 8 million is certainly way more than their population.
And her listeners are all over the world, but it's easy to lose perspective, like what you were saying, because with the pressure of trying to sign to a label, they want to see the numbers before the talent. It's like if you have 8 million listens on a song and that's not good enough for a label, it makes you feel like shit and you lose track that
forget
8 million
labels,
people
man.
listen to
I've
it.
been telling people to forget labels for the past 15 years, man. You don't need them.
Yeah, and I mean, you're perfect. You're a perfect example.
You don't need them. If you've got 8 million listeners, what on earth do you need a label for? Like, seriously. If you've got 8 million listeners, you are good. You just need to leverage your business in a certain way and set things up. If you've got an audience, I mean, even if 1/10 of them are like genuine fans, you've got a gigantic audience that you can tap into and sell them all kinds of stuff. You can go touring with that.
Yeah. And she had a few 100,000 listeners per month, but still that's more than you need. And the fact that she even considered that no one was listening speaks to that disconnect that you were talking about, that you can lose track of the numbers to the faces. If you're actually picturing 100,000 people, 300,000 people a month putting their AirPods in, listening to your music, that like you couldn't even see the end of that line. No. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Speaking of music, one of the tweets that you've recently had gone viral, and I say one because you've had many tweets go viral, is a clip from the Kanye West interview with Big Boy TV that you had chopped together. And to pull out a quote from Kanye from that Big Boy interview, Kanye said, quote, "They," meaning his parents, "were fighting for us to have the right to our opinion, not the right to vote for whoever the white liberals said black people are supposed to vote for." And you had posted that and then retweeted it with a message. And at the top, you said, "This is what genuinely woke sounds like." And that went crazy. I don't know why people consider that statement so controversial by Kanye, saying that you can think for yourself and you don't know how I'm going to vote based on the color of my skin. But people did find that controversial. What was your initial reaction to seeing that?
I was pretty much clapping as I was watching that interview. It was a great interview. I was watching that and was just like, yes, finally. So it's so funny. One of my fans was like, "Dude, has Kanye been reading your Twitter feed or something?" And I was just like,
he could have.
It's possible. Yeah. It's entirely possible. I know there's only 1 degree of separation between us. So, it is possible. But yeah, man, I was just spot on. Like I was just saying, spot on. Like this what I've been consistent with that message for a long time, of people just letting people know, man, people don't need to be boxed in to, their immutable characteristics or their groups or their demographics or anything like that. It's one of those things that you shouldn't, like you said, it shouldn't be controversial to say that. It shouldn't be, it's common sense. Hopefully there shouldn't be anything to argue with that statement in itself, right? But yet people still want to debate it because a lot of people live in, and for various reasons, have this kind of groupthink mentality where they always need to think in a group or think as a collective or go along with what they've kind of been told, or, just kind of seeing what other people are doing and going with that flow rather than really truly dissecting things and looking at different sides of arguments and thinking for themselves. And this happens along a lot of lines. It can happen along social lines, political lines, religious lines, anything like that. And what I always encourage people to do is not so much trying to, I'm happy to tell people my opinion on pretty much anything, but it's not even saying like, look, you need to totally agree with me on everything or you need to align with me on everything. But one, it's okay for people to have different opinions on stuff, right? That's kind of fundamental to, especially if you're talking about a country like the USA, where you've got 350 million people who are of all different stripes and beliefs and ideas and things like that. And you need people to be able to get on with each other and not violently conflict and things like that. So it should kind of be a given, but we're living in a sort of modern day climate where it seems like it's not always. So much of the stuff that I say myself on social media or even in some podcasts and interviews, I often feel like I shouldn't need to say it, or I feel like it's not particularly special or particularly profound or anything like that. Because my mind works in a certain way, and I've had certain ideas and beliefs that I've literally held since I was like a child or a teenager. And I never specifically knew that the way my mind worked and the way that I thought things through was particularly unique. I thought, oh, everybody does that. And I've quite quickly realized, okay, no, actually not everybody does that. So sometimes it is necessary to say some of the stuff that should be obvious and should be apparent because other people are not doing it. Either they're not thinking in that way, or a lot of people who are thinking in that way due to more social pressures or concerns don't necessarily want to voice certain opinions that they think may get the angry Twitter mob coming after them, or they don't want to, they've got concerns around their job, or, oh, maybe if I say this, I'll get fired, or I'll lose this sponsor, or I'll lose that opportunity, or whatever it is. And, I used to be a little bit more cautious in some regard, but as time has gone on, I've just become more and more willing to kind of be more authentic publicly. I've been that way in private kind of for a very long time. But some of those ideas and things, I'm happy to just put them out there. And one thing I love about Twitter in particular amongst the social platforms is that I can literally put anything out there. Like nothing is off limits. I've discussed some of the most controversial, contentious, polarizing issues in the entire world on my platform. And my audience is kind of ready for that. They're open to that. Sometimes it can get very, very heavy. It can also be like very funny. Like I can do what I want, right? If I'm just, okay, cool, I just want to put out something.
You can do whatever mood you're feeling,
exactly.
whatever you feel like communicating to people.
Yeah.
And you're independent as a music artist. You're independent with your Twitter following, your podcast. So you're uncancelable, basically, if that's a word, uncancelable. You can say what you want. You can learn and look at different topics and speak to who you want, because so often people get demonized for just speaking to someone or associating with someone or being in a picture, 8 years ago with someone. And you've built up that following yourself, and people that are following you, I would assume for the most part are on board with that, except for the small minority who just want to troll and talk shit and do things like that, which is the nature of Twitter. But you can say what's on your mind and know that there's no one that's going to tap you on the shoulder and be like, hey, like, someone's going to step aside for Zuby Media. Like, we're going to bring in the next Zuby. Like, you're like, you don't have to worry about that. No. That has to be such a freeing feeling at the same time. It's scary because you've built it yourself. So you're more protective of it, but it has to be freeing as well to have built that from the ground up.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. I mean, it's just the freedom to be myself and to open up conversations. A lot of what I do on there is, sometimes I just want to start a conversation. I just want to start a debate, right? Sometimes I'll purposely just kick the hornet's nest because I know people are going to react in a certain way, or people are going to respond in a certain way. And it's like, cool, let the discussion begin. Sometimes I'll just be sitting back and actually watching it. I'll be seeing what other people are thinking. I like to know I like to understand how the world works. I like to know what other people think, whether I agree with them or I disagree with them. Sometimes I vehemently disagree with them, and sometimes I'll let them know why. But I try to keep it civil. I try to keep it cordial. I try not to reduce my own following, or in terms of who I follow, make it some kind of just like pure echo chamber where like it's only people who I 99% agree with on everything, stuff like that. It's like, fine, as long as people remain decent and don't just start slinging around ad hominems and insults and, if people have a sense, it's really about having a sense of humor with a lot of things. And this is something that's missing from a lot of the conversation, is just one, honesty, people just being honest and authentic. And that's one of my USPs. That's something that draws a lot of people to me because they know that Zuby's not gonna BS them. I'm not gonna pretend to be something I'm not, or say something that might be popular, even if I don't believe it or anything like that. Like, I'm happy to be that one guy who goes against the grain if I feel like that is needed, or I feel like that's the correct position. And I'm kind of happy to take those bullets and arrows proverbially for other people. So I know what I do emboldens and encourages a lot of other people out there, which is one of the aims, to inspire people. And also to help people understand, yeah, you can have disagreements, you can have different conversations, you can have different positions, and it doesn't mean you need to hate each other or you can't get along or you can't hang out with people or, that person, like you were saying, that person spoke to that person who spoke to that person who took a picture with that person. So you now can't speak to them. That person's off limits. That person, like all that stuff is silly. And in the long term, I think it's very destructive as well, because one thing a lot of people have been talking about, especially since 2016, both in the UK and the USA, is this whole situation of political polarization, or what people call like the culture war and stuff like that, and saying, like Americans are more divided. You'll hear people say Americans are more divided than they've been in the past 50 years and that kind of thing. And that may be true in some ways, but also it's like, look, I've been in the States now for 8 weeks. I've been going around these different cities. I've been walking around. I've been meeting people. As far as I can tell, stuff looks pretty normal, right? People aren't in the street like throwing bricks at each other down the city and, fighting each other and stuff like that. Yeah. It's like, no, most people are busy. Most people are decently tolerant. Most people kind of just want to get on with their lives and do their things. So with social media, stuff can always be more amplified and more polarized than it necessarily is in real life, just because of the way people interact and people behave on there. But a lot of it is just kind of being that person saying like, look, hey man, there's people are people are individuals. Everyone can think freely and have their own voice, and people can have it out and have their arguments and whatever. But ultimately, people can still coexist. And that's not something to take for granted either. As someone who grew up in multiple different countries and who's been to a lot of places, that's, if you live in the US, it's easy to take things like freedom of speech for granted. It's easy to take it for granted that if you're in the UK or the USA, I mean, you can say whatever like. I was just in DC, okay? You've got people who think that, you get people saying crazy things like Donald Trump is a fascist, okay? Outside of the White House, there's like numerous like permanent protest sort of like displays and things going on, right? Gates. I'm like, if Donald Trump were a fascist, you would not be allowed, right? You'd be in prison for doing this. There's a lot of countries, not like a few. There's tons of countries where if you go outside of their parliament or their main political place and you start like shouting about how much you hate or you dislike or you whatever the president or the leader or the administration, within minutes you're, if not being beaten or shot, you're gonna be locked away, right? It's like people have the freedom to really say actually whatever they want and to have dissent and to have debate and things like that. And people take that for granted because they don't generally understand that you can't do that everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fascists don't support your right to call them a fascist.
No, exactly.
If you can openly call a leader a fascist, you know that you're not living in a fascist society.
Exactly. So stuff like that, it's just kind of trying to remind people and bring people back to that sensitive level of like, look, okay, you might not be on this. Everyone might not be on the same side of all these things or like the same people or whatever, but let's not go so crazy that people are making it out to be, 10 times worse than it actually is in reality. And by people really overblowing things, it's, all it does is it keeps raising the temperature, and you don't want to get things to a genuine stage where it's like, okay, people are now willing to go out on the street and fight each other or shoot each other or something over something that, shouldn't be as important and as obsessive as people are making it out to be.
Hey guys, I wanted to interrupt this episode real quick to let you guys know that you can now support Auxoro with a donation on Patreon, PayPal, or Venmo. We're a completely independent platform with no outside sponsors or investors, and we're grateful for any amount, no matter how small, to help push the conversation forward. If you'd like to support, you can visit patreon.com/Auxoro. The link is in the podcast description as well. On Patreon, you get early access to episodes, discounts on merchandise, and other Patreon exclusive content. Also, you can go check out our merch at auxoro.com/store. We have tees and hoodies for sale, so you can listen to the show in style. Now back to the episode. You said it before, most people are the same in most aspects. You want to have purpose, you want to make money, you want to have free time to do what you want to do. You want to be in a relationship that's good for you, but you don't necessarily see that on Twitter and social media. I think mainstream media has a lot to do with that as well, because everything is so siloed into a certain point of view, whether it's left or right. And then you get on people's channels where it's their true personality behind the channel, like Zuby, for instance, or Steven Crowder or Joe Rogan. And you have people that don't even, they may hold very different beliefs, but they're able to sit down in the same room as each other and talk for 2 hours or 3 hours, and nothing, like, it doesn't burn down.
No.
Nothing scary happens. No one pulls out guns and starts shooting each other. Like, you can have people get in a room and have a conversation. I think that the media kind of gives this sense that you can't trust people to talk to each other, or else like shit's gonna get out of control. Like, don't let these people get in the same room with each other, or else everything's gonna backfire. But that's never happened once. You have people now that have 5 million, 10 million subscribers on YouTube, and they're pulling in more views than CNN, Fox News, NBC to watch a podcast or to watch a talk show produced by someone in their room, which is crazy. It's never been like that before.
It's crazy, but it's great because discussion is, as long as people are talking, they're not fighting, man. So it's the opposite of what anybody is saying in that regard of, people talking in there, that creating a problem. It's like, no, that's what diffuses it, right? This is why I don't like the idea of people being deplatformed or being censored or being treated like some sort of like pariah or leper who no one should be allowed to talk to or speak to or anything like that, because that actually leads to more extremism. Because what happens is that those people go off. It's like, okay, well, I've been kicked out of mainstream society. And then they're going to go along with the other outcasts who have been kicked out of mainstream society. And some of them may genuinely hold very extremist type views and things like that. And siloing those people off that's the worst thing you can do. You want to talk to people and say, okay, like you might be going a little too far that way or too far that way. Like, let's bring you back into a more reasonable, moderate position. And, discussion and debate does that, because lo and behold, the sort of correct position on most things is normally not at the extremes, right? Like anything that's radical, anything that's extreme, generally it's called extreme for a reason. It's an outlier. It's not quite in the realm of normalcy. So with most things, like, it's not that hard to kind of walk people back from the edge just with reason, right? Whether that's like moral reason or just like logic or facts or anything. If you've got
just layers of emotion that they're built on top of, you have to chip away at emotion, and you can't always do that as an outsider. You have to let that person kind of discover the layers that they've been building up. It's funny. I started going to this public speaking group called Toastmasters. So for people that are listening that have never been to a Toastmasters meeting, it's all over the world. I highly recommend going to a meeting. You work on public speaking for 5 to 6 minutes at a time. And I met this woman that told me she was a recovering woke person in the meeting. She was from England, and she was at the Wall Street Toastmasters meeting just for this one time. And then she was heading back, but she had a job where she was at home all day. So she was able to be on Twitter more than the average 9-to-5 person. And she said she just got funneled down these like feminist rabbit holes where shit was getting crazy. And that was running through her mind every day, basically indoctrinating her because she wasn't following opposing point of views. And I think it's good to have a pulse on both sides, because even if you disagree with something, you should at least try to understand what it is that you disagree with it. But she wasn't even like giving the other side a chance to breathe. And she's like, yeah, I've been recovering now for about a year or two.
That's so funny. I know a couple of people like that.
It's a crazy thing to see.
Yeah.
Going off of the deplatforming, one of the things that I've been thinking about recently is the cause and effect of things that people say and things that people tweet. And most of the time when people argue for deplatforming a certain person, they will say, this person tweeted this which led to this. And so they incited a violent act, or by their speech, they directly led to this event transpiring. And I started to think, so say that's true. Say if you tweeted something that led to an event happening, say, like I kept tweeting, I hate my brother Matt. And then one day someone goes out and beats the shit out of Matt on the sidewalk in Brooklyn. And that's not how it happened. So we'll take a real example. I'm just kidding. But so if you tweet that repeatedly and then someone goes out and does it, if you're going to give me credit for the negative things that happen, then you also have to give me credit for the positive things that happen. So if I tweeted out, these are the most effective ways to become an entrepreneur and start your own business, and someone reaches out to me and says like, hey, I started my own business and now I have $1 million in revenue and it all started from your tweet, then shouldn't I be entitled to X percentage of that person's revenue if I incited that business, just like I incited that violence? So I just think if you want to play that game, then you can't pick and choose that we're only going to give you credit for the negative things that you tweet.
I get you. I don't think people want to play that game at all. It's a very, very, very slippery slope, right? There's a direct incitement to violence is not even protected by the First Amendment in the USA, right? If someone directly calls for, violence, harassment, something like that against someone, directly threatens someone, that is, they're legally culpable for that. However, if someone merely expresses an opinion and then some unhinged person decides to take that or use that as some excuse to go commit some heinous act or do violence or something like that, then that's on the person who did it, right? You always have to blame the person who actually commits the act, because that's just what's sensible. Otherwise, you can always say, anyone could be able to do anything, and then say, oh, well, so-and-so or this thing inspired it or influenced it or whatever. It's like, look, adults are responsible for their own actions, and they need to own their own actions. If someone tells me that they don't like somebody, and then my response to that is to go out and to hurt the person they say they didn't like, the person who said they don't like that person is not the one they didn't incite anything, right? They didn't call for any violence or anything like that. Can people be influenced by the words of others? Yeah, sure. But ultimately your own behavior. I mean, it's silly. It would be like that whole idea of, I played Grand Theft Auto, and so like I ran out on the street and, jacked somebody out their car and beat them up, and you see what I mean? I need to sue Rockstar Games because they made the game. And it's like, no, but nobody told you to go out there and do that. And even if somebody told you to, which they shouldn't, if you go with it and do it, you're still the one committing the act. If someone comes up to me and is like, oh, hey, Zuby, go and go beat that guy up for me. I'm like, no. Right? Like, like, I'm not going to be like, go and do it. And then they told me to. It's like,
because if you're saying if you're responsible for your followers and you're taking the consciousness of action away from the people that follow you, you're basically accepting the burden of everything that your followers do. And you can't parse that down into nuance. I think it has to be an all or nothing thing. And I don't want to play that game either.
Yeah, you don't want to give it room.
And it's funny because you have things, say you listen to a rap song that has incredibly vulgar lyrics and it talks about drugs, carjacking, just awful things. And there are billions of people that listen to rap music that don't go out and do those things.
Exactly.
And then you have other people that may listen to rap music that have vulgar lyrics and then also may commit crimes that just happens to be an overlap. And like you said, you can be influenced by lyrics, just like you can be influenced to do great things by rap lyrics. And I know you've spoken about that as well. People reach out to you all the time and say, hey, I just want to let you know your podcast, your music, your Twitter feed changed the way I think about something. And that's great. But then ultimately, you are responsible for taking the next step and deciding what to do with that information and how to act in the future.
Yeah.
Kanye Kanye West, I was thinking about this recently, not the interview, but his music, how he made a Christian gospel album #1 in the world. That's crazy.
That's amazing.
People don't really listen to Christian music outside of the Christian community. Most people don't turn on the radio. And I went to Catholic school. I listened to a little bit of, I guess, what would be on the Christian radio station, but I thought it was bad. I thought it was terrible. I was like, I wouldn't listen to this anyway. But if you listen, Kanye is obviously a musical genius, and it also has a Christian message behind it. Jesus is King. What have been your thoughts, if you've gotten a chance to listen to it, on how he's been able to make an album with a Christian message behind it? Yeah, #1 in the world. I think that's
incredible, man.
Crazy.
Yeah, I mean, getting Jesus as King #1 social media trend for an entire day internationally is pretty impressive. So, I mean, I've loved seeing it, man. I'm not somebody who ever thought that. I'm not someone who ever tried to cancel or whoever gave up on Kanye or anything like that. Right? With all the stuff last year, I was like, man, his message, his overarching message hasn't changed. People are just mad because he's not on the political side that they maybe previously thought he was on. But in terms of his, Kanye has always been a free thinker. Kanye was the one who, when all these rappers were rapping about violence and dressing in a certain way and kind of making more kind of like gangster oriented, I'm a thug kind of music in the early thousands, Kanye was the one who came out there in the pink polo shirts and the backpack and was just, his first album, College Dropout, had pretty much no violent lyrics. It wasn't like overly gratuitous or sexual or anything. It was just like, hey, I'm this guy. I'm kind of a normal guy just trying to live my life. I'm self-conscious. I've been through this, I've been through that. And people loved it. They found it refreshing. I mean, Kanye West set the blueprint. He opened the door for so many rappers who are super popular now, whether you're talking about your J. Cole, Kendrick, Drake, all those guys. Like he opened that door to not have to be a certain type of rapper to really blow up. Like there's people who've done it before, but not on that huge sort of mainstream level. So I think Kanye deserves a ton of credit for that. He's never been afraid to go against the grain. I mean, the thing with where we live now, people have such short-term memories. People don't remember stuff, or they're just not aware of stuff. Kanye West was the guy who 10 years ago, maybe like 10 years ago, I remember specifically, he came out and he was like, you know what? Rappers should stop being homophobic. Rappers should stop like calling gay people the F word and like this isn't cool, guys. He came out public and he took a lot of heat for that. He took a lot of heat within like the culture community, whatever people want to call it, for saying that and just being like, you know what, like this isn't right, guys. And people forgot this. You know what I mean? Like now you're getting people saying, oh, he mentioned Chick-fil-A on his album. Like you're getting LGBT lobbies and stuff saying, oh, we should boycott him because he likes Chick-fil-A. And you're just like, what on earth are you, what are you even talking about? Like, have you forgotten like everything else? Like he's not even telling you like, go vote Trump, go vote Republican. He's just saying like, look, everyone can have their different views. People can, I believe in this, I believe in that, you can believe in that, and this is how I want to live my life, right? It's not stepping on other people's toes. So, man, I've got a huge amount of respect for that guy. A huge amount of respect. I always have, and it's something that's probably been solidified even more so kind of over the past year, especially seeing how much, people really tried to ruin him. People really did try to ruin him, and he's just kind of risen from the ashes with a, very interesting, and I think good new album. I don't think it's his best. It's certainly not one of his worst. I think it's kind of in the middle in terms of the overall musical quality. But the message of it, it's refreshing. And it's cool to have an artist who's that popular, that mainstream, making such a bold statement, making a gospel rap album called Jesus is King. Yeah. Like, he's putting stuff on the line. He's in a position where he's got a lot of stuff to lose, but he's taking that step. And by doing that, I believe that will encourage and inspire other people.
And he's proven himself to the point where his followers are willing to go with him in whatever direction he chooses. Because often it's not where he just was. He's here for 1 year and then the next year he might go somewhere completely different. And he's proven that he's been able to make that transition and try something new and be successful. And I've always respected people like Kanye that are able to do that. And people get weird about that sometimes, where they say, "Oh, I like the old Kanye better," or "I like the old insert musician's name
Sure.
here." And if you like the old Kanye that much better, it's everywhere. You could go stream it if you want. You could stream every single album he's ever done. And you have to remember that he's a human being too. He's going to explore his own potential. He's going to explore different avenues of thinking. He makes mistakes. He messes up. He comes to conclusions about areas of his life that are going to leak out into his music. So it's like if I was to create, if I had 7 or 8 albums spanning over the course of my life, 10 years since I was 15, it would be a mess. It'd be like all over the place.
Yeah, if you still believed everything you believed at 15, then where's the growth?
Yeah,
where's the progress? And ultimately, if I believe that someone is trying to put out a positive message and they're trying to improve themselves and they're trying to be a better person and they're trying to find themselves, walk in Christ, whatever the thing is, I'm not going to try to tear that person down. Right? I will like support that person in their journey. It's a little bit like how I think, how would I put it? Like, I'm going to use maybe a bit of a weird analogy. It's like,
we love weird analogies.
If you see like, an obese person at the gym, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, imagine the kind of mentality that would want to like make fun of that person, right? That takes like a really messed up person to see. You can see that person. They're in the progress. They're in the process of trying to improve themselves. They've taken that step to go out there and improve themselves physically, probably emotionally, make themselves a better person. And you want to go and laugh at them? Like, are you crazy? Like, to me, like that's the craziest thing. So in any regard, if I see someone who's trying to be better, trying to improve themselves, trying to do whatever, like the worst thing that somebody can do is try to, tear them down or discourage them or whatever. Even if they might be making some mistakes, they may, do something wrong here or there or whatever. But it's like, man, they're trying. You can see that they were here and they're trying to get to this place. Like Kanye was in a admittedly in a bit of a dark place, right? You saw that in his music, right? His stuff started out, really quite clearly positive. His first album had Jesus Walks and, All Falls Down and Never Let You Down. They had really sort of positive songs that were light and stuff. And then, his music always stayed dope, but, it did descend and, they had 808s, No Heartbreak. And it kind of, after his mom died, it's got a little more melancholy and a little bit darker. And then you had like My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy and Jesus. And those were like, sonically very interesting, but lyrically, a lot more sort of dark and perverse and whatever. And now it's like, cool. He's trying to like lift himself out of that thing. Yeah. And now people want to like crap on him to like push him back into it. And it's like, no, man, like that's not.
Yeah. Before this, he literally had a song where he was just exploring his mind about killing himself and saying like, I've had thoughts about killing myself and my family and my wife. And I don't know why I'm thinking like this, but I'm just going to put it on a rap song and speak. And it's, I give him credit for putting that out there because a lot of people have those thoughts to different extremes, but not many people are willing to talk about it, nonetheless put it on an album.
No. I mean, that's really what artists do best, Artists, showing some degree of vulnerability, how much you want to show to the world. That's individual. That's up to the artist. But the truth is we all have positive thoughts, negative thoughts, dark thoughts, happy thoughts, so people can always relate to that to some degree. Even if it can be kind of like, oh, wow, that was a bit much or whatever. But it's like, wow, but you can still take that and you're still talking about the human experience and we're all human beings. So everyone can relate to the human experience. Even if you've never been in that place yourself, it's like, oh, wow, that's what it's like for someone to kind of go through that or be in that situation or whatever. Like, I don't know. I've never been depressed. I've never struggled with depression or anything like that. But if I'm talking to someone who has, or I'm listening to a song where that's something someone is talking about, I'm like, that's interesting. That's, I don't want to ever go through that, but that's a part of the human experience I can understand and also develop greater empathy for fellow people who may be in that position at some point or whatever. And it's like, okay, I can at least empathize with that. And then, yeah, I just think one of my goals in life that I never really explicitly state, but one of my goals is to, as best as I can, understand the human experience and the different levels of it and ranges and things like that. It's part of the reason why, like, I'm not ready just yet, but it's part of the reasons why it's like, I certainly want to have kids in the future, because you can't experience the whole human experience without that factor, right?
Yeah. And you're putting yourself in a good position right now to be able to do that, because the things that you're involved in, take music, for example, you are seeing people's reaction in real time on stage, looking into the faces and the body language of how people react to your art. And you also have your podcast where you're sitting down with people face to face and talking for an hour and a half. And sometimes there are uncomfortable moments. Sometimes you get into topics that you weren't planning on doing, but you are gathering data on the human experience and other people's perspectives and how to navigate the world. Something I wanted to get into, I just finished the book 21 Lessons for the 21st Century by Noah Harari.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that he talks about is having to reinvent yourself in the future economy. So basically how the old way of learning for the first 20, 25 years of your life and then working based on just what you learned is out the window.
Okay.
So he thinks you'll have to adapt every 10 years or so, depending on what your expertise is or how you're working. I think if that's true, then avenues like music and podcasting and exploring the human experience and different ways to tap into that puts you in a pretty good position to be able to maneuver based on how you can make a living, because not everything's going to be growing at the same level. And say podcasting is hot one year, music is hot one year, or you start doing public speaking, or you decide to get into something completely different. The whole tapping into the human experience gives you the ability to kind of shift in that environment.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. And, the ability to articulate yourself clearly is actually a rare skill, and it's very powerful and something that you can develop and improve on over time. Ability to listen. It sounds so obvious, but most people are not good at listening. Listening is a skill that you have to learn and develop. And if you're a podcast host, you pick that up pretty quickly. Just the ability to just shut up and just listen to what that person's saying and not always just be thinking of what do I want to say next, just really listening to what somebody else is saying. And that helps in everything. That can help in business. That can help in romantic relationships. That can help with your family, with everything like that. And there are a lot of skills that you can kind of pick up in that realm, which are just very much like human skills, shall we say?
Things that aren't being taught in school.
Things that are hard to just, sit down and read a book and this book will teach you how to listen. It's like, maybe you might pick up some tips here and there, but you can't read a book that makes you there's no book that reading it will make you a better public speaker or will make you say and ah and and like less, right? Just, I'm sure
every podcaster goes through having to listen back to their audio
and you're like,
saying,
why do I keep saying
47 times in 2 minutes?
Why do I keep saying every sentence? Why do I keep saying like every 2 seconds? And you don't notice it, but you do it a lot. And then over time, you listen to more recent things and you're like, okay, cool. I've gotten better at reducing that and minimizing it. And it's less distracting for listeners and things like that. And that translates into a lot of things. So if you did want to go into public speaking or you're in some kind of deal or meeting or whatever, and you're talking to people and you want to appear more confident and more clear and things like that, it all helps. And I think it allows people to pivot in a lot of different areas. So if you've kind of just built up that general skill set, and even more so if you've got some kind of personal brand, if you want to call it that, on top of it, then I think that's sort of where the future is heading. I think that in the future, I think we're already there, but I certainly think in the future, each individual is going to sort of be their own one-person media company.
Like they'll be running their own show, essentially. Yeah.
I mean, everyone kind of is already doing this with social media and with your phone. You've literally got a studio in your hand, whether or not people realize it. You can create video, make audio, take pictures, upload, share, disseminate information. You can do journalism with your phone, right? You can just, whether that's on Twitter or live streaming or whatever, you've had people who have, I mean, look at people like, Tim Pool.
Yeah, dude, he's a badass.
Yeah.
He went head to head with Jack Dorsey and the lawyer.
Yeah. But I mean, he just goes out. He's got does like 6 or 7 YouTube videos a day. He just goes out live streaming, his Twitter, everything. He's just one person, but he's doing more real journalism than a lot of legitimate, like huge billion-dollar mainstream media outlets.
Yeah. He tells people too how he thinks and where he aligns. He always says, if I had to put a label on it, I'm probably center left, just to let you guys know so you know where I'm coming from, but I'm going to try to report it as objectively as possible. And then you have mainstream media on both sides saying we're the center, and they're they're hundreds of miles, thousands of miles apart, both saying we're down the middle, trust us. And then he's like, I mean, honestly, I'm probably over here a little bit, but I mean, this is what happened. If you want to listen to me, that's cool. If not, that's cool as well.
Yeah.
He's like, I feel like he embodies the punk rock spirit as a journalist, because what he's doing, reporting the news objectively, has true journalism is supposed to be, not activism. You're going against the grain just by reporting the news without a spin, or with as least spin as possible, coming from your own biases, and recognizing those biases and telling people, these are my biases, just to let you know. You're going against what the entire mainstream is doing, which is why what he's doing is incredible. I hope he gets even bigger, because people need to hear him.
Yeah, man. It's a great time to be a truth seeker and a truth speaker, because people want that. People are hungry for it, man. People are really hungry for it. In the past decade especially, people have just been fed a lot of lies, and people are starting to realize it, and people are exhausted. It's just, you said you were talking about the mainstream media. I mean, they're losing a lot of viewers and followers, and a lot of it is just because they've lied too much, right? Or spun the truth too many times. I mean, for the past 3 years, for the past 2.5 years, it's been, they've been trying to paint Donald Trump as some Russian agent or collusion. This with the Kremlin is controlling the White House. All this stuff, like this huge nothing burger for 2.5 years. And now they're kind of just like trying to quickly move on to another thing. And now it's Ukraine and it's impeachment. And it's like, you've been, for how long, you've been telling millions and millions of people, your own citizens, that this is the case and this is happening and this is happening. And it was false. It was not true. And that's just one clear example, but it's happened with a lot of different things. And if you continually do that to people, then you can't be surprised when people start to lose that trust and people start seeking alternative sources, which, even if they have some biases, at least are honest and open with their bias. So it might be like, okay, look, I'm Tim Pool and I'm center left, or I'm David Pakman and I'm more of a progressive, or I'm Ben Shapiro and I'm going to give my conservative take or whatever. But okay, these are their general positions. So you can easily filter out, okay, this stuff is just factual. And then, okay, here they're giving their personal opinion on it. It's the same thing. It's the same, it's not that dissimilar. It's less political, but Joe Rogan's show, your podcast, my podcast, all these things. It's like, look, this is my own perspective or position, but this is going on. People like that just because it's real, it's truthful, it's honest. It's not a propaganda channel, and you're just trying to get people to nudge them or fully shift them in one direction or another. It's just like, look, this is my view, this is my position. And I think a lot of people right now have a thirst for both knowledge and just honesty and truthfulness.
And that's what I think the great thing about podcasting is, because I think the only requirement that you need to have a good podcast is that you're following your curiosity. Because if you're not curious about that person, why are you even interviewing them, and then you're enthusiastic about learning what they have to say, and you're not going into it with a title in mind for the podcast. Like sometimes I hear episodes and I think that, this person may have been trying to get this story, which is fine. That's the nature of some podcasts, but an honest conversation can't flow as well as it should when you go into a podcast saying, all right, I'm going to come out with the end goal of getting this person to say this in mind. And that's how I'm going to promote it and put that clip on mainstream news, which I think is also why people are turning away from mainstream news, because we're told that our attention spans are constantly getting lower and lower and lower. Yet people are listening to Joe Rogan talk for 3.5 hours to the same person. And they crave that authenticity. They crave people getting in front of the camera and telling it like it is.
I was sick a few weeks ago, and I listened to that whole 5-hour one he did with Alex Jones.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the best video on the internet. It's absolutely incredible.
Alex Jones is a character.
Is crazy. I was like, man, yeah, because I had a chance to potentially go on InfoWars when I was in Austin, and that was one of the few things I was kind of umming and ahhing about, and then I wasn't really the timing and stuff didn't work out too well in the end anyway. But I was like, man, had I listened to this podcast prior to that, I don't think I would. I don't think I would have hesitated so much. It was insane.
It's hilarious to hear him get on a roll, and then Joe Rogan's just like, slow down, slow down, slow down. You just said that aliens are trying to enter our minds through DMT, and that the government is holding extraterrestrials, and the whole thing with his dad working in the secret operatives, things like that. And
amazing.
Joe just has to like go back and be like, let's dissect one of the 20 things you just said. And we'll talk about that for a little bit, and then we'll go to the next thing. And I think it's also hilarious that when Alex Jones got canceled, essentially pulled off of everything, that podcasters were just like, oh no, like come on our show. Like I think he's probably been on 10 or 15 different shows since then. People that have had him on the show, they didn't get hunted down and tortured or whatever. Their listenership hasn't dropped off the map. No one came out of the woodworks to cancel them just because they had a conversation with Alex Jones, regardless if you agree with his views or not. And you don't, if you go into a conversation agreeing with everything that someone says, then one of you is lying or you're talking to your clone. Like it has to be one of those two. So it's like, having Alex Jones on a podcast would be exhilarating, regardless
he's entertaining. Yeah. Like people can say whatever, but the dude is entertaining, and he does have insight. He's not an idiot, man. He can certainly exaggerate and be crazy and be nutty. How much of that is for show and how much is just his natural personality? I don't know. I don't know the guy personally, but yeah, man. I think it's I guess in society it's important sometimes to have people like that. And there's a lot of stuff that sounds crazy until it's proven true or until it happens or whatever. And there's certainly stuff that he's gone about in the past which sounded a little bit nutty or crazy or I don't know. And then lo and behold, a year later, if something shows up in the actual mainstream news and you're like, oh, wow, okay. That's
Have you listened to the podcast with Alex Jones and T.I.?
Some of it, not the entire thing yet.
I love that one. I love how T.I. just straight up just said, you're lying. Like you're lying about that, or hold up. And that's also an example of a conversation that if cancel culture was expanded from this, I think the exacerbated space that it is on Twitter, this like hyperbole that exists on Twitter, that the loudest people are shouting from the rooftops, like, don't talk to this person's canceled. If that persisted in the minds of people, persisted in the minds of average Americans and the people that you see on the street, that conversation would never have happened.
Yeah,
T.I. would never sit down with Alex Jones. Like, who the hell would have ever thought?
I was surprised. I was actually pleasantly surprised that it happened. I saw something. I was like, really? Like, okay, good. I was like, props to T.I. for that, because I was like, I know these two aren't going to agree on much. So good for both of them on doing it and being willing to do that. And yeah, I need to go back and listen to the full thing. I listened to some of the clips, but I need to listen to it from start to finish.
We took a short intermission during the podcast, but during that intermission, we found out that Zuby has sold 11 books just during the recording of this podcast. So that is a perfect segue to go into Zuby. What is the name of the book that you wrote, and what made you want to write this book on fitness?
Sure. So the book is called Strong Advice, Zuby's Guide to Fitness for Everybody. I've been training since I was about 15 years old. That was when I first stepped foot in the gym. Primarily driven because I wanted to get a little bit more jacked for rugby. I wanted to be stronger and make sure I was the one dishing out the damage rather than being on the receiving end of it. So when I first started out training, I used to just kind of follow the bodybuilder bro stuff, just read stuff in magazines that was generally written and accustomed for people who were on performance enhancing drugs and all that. And I used to just eat way too much food and eat when I wasn't hungry. And when I was 15, I weighed more than I do now.
Yeah, I went through a fat phase as well. I grew and did a lot of cardio, and then I started lifting after that, but continue. I didn't mean to.
No worries, man. Yeah, so I just kind of got big fat and fairly strong for my age, but I didn't really learn what I was doing until I was kind of 18, 19. I started to get a better grip on it, and then in my 20s, I kind of mastered the nutrition a little bit more, as well as getting the training better. So what I wanted to do with my book, Strong Advice, is I just wanted to write the book that I kind of wish someone gave me when I was 15 or 16. And it was just look, these are the basics. This is what you need to really know and understand about nutrition. This is the stuff that matters. This is the stuff that really doesn't matter and you don't want to get bogged down in. Same with training. This is the stuff that matters. This is the stuff that doesn't, because people, there's so much misinformation out there, so much conflicting information out there. This person is saying do carnivore diet. This person's saying do keto. This person says do paleo. This person says do vegan. And, this person says coconut oil is good for you. This person says it's bad for you, whatever. And people just get caught up in all these details and fads and trends and stuff like that. So I wanted to really boil away the BS and just leave the fundamentals that truly, truly matter. Whether someone is trying to build muscle or burn fat, gain weight, lose weight, just generally get fitter or just maintain. Both for the nutrition side and the training side, I wanted to make that really clear and just let people know based off of my own knowledge, my own experience, all my reading and the various studying and stuff I've done. Look, this is what matters. It's a very slim and concise book. It's only the ebook version's under 70 pages, the paperback version's under 100 pages. I do have the audiobook coming soon as well. That's recorded. So whatever someone's goal is, it will help them to achieve it, essentially. And if someone finds the whole gym thing complicated or just doesn't know where to start, doesn't know what to do, then it's a great guide for them to get into it and something that people can refer back to when they need to make sure that they really stay on track with their goals. And it's been received amazingly well. People are getting good results from it. I've got tons and tons of positive reviews now. And ultimately, it's helping to help people to help themselves, which is kind of what I'm all about. Providing that inspiration, that motivation, that knowledge that people seek and need so that, they can kind of upgrade themselves, just like I'm constantly trying to upgrade myself. Mm-hmm. So I didn't want to leave anything on the table. Of course, I'm primarily known as a rapper and through my music and everything, but it's look, I'm also an expert in this regard. So why don't I put something out there? I can just write it. That's what the great thing with books and, information like that is I can write this once and it's an evergreen book. Even in 5 years' time, that book will still be relevant. Mm-hmm. It's not going to go stale. The information is outdated. I can update it if and when need be. But 5 years from now, 20 years from now, everything I've written in that book should still be relevant. So I wanted to kind of put it in one place, and then, hey, anyone who wants my advice or wants to know this or that, I can just direct them and say, hey, check out this book.
It's awesome that a tool like Strong Advice is out there because, like you were saying, there is so much information out there about working out, and not everyone is qualified to speak on what it takes to work out. That is an Instagram influencer, or they're posting videos of them doing bodyweight squats in a bikini, and they're selling these toning videos and things. And if that's how you want to run your business, that's fine. There's a market that allows for that, but you have tons of people that are saying that this book has helped them out, that has given them a foundation. I wish I had a little bit more of a foundation when I started lifting about 10 years ago in high school.
I think we all do.
And you've been lifting longer than you've been rapping.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you were to have a long-term expertise, the lifting is a holy grail to tap into the knowledge from Zuby. So I want to thank you again for coming on the podcast. I really do appreciate it.
You're very welcome, man.
And everyone go check out Strong Advice. Maybe he's up to 15 now sold on the podcast by the time we finish recording that.
We will check.
And I have a feeling it's going to get a lot higher. So thank you.
Nice, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Auxoro. If you haven't already, please hit us with a 5-star rating and comment on Apple Podcasts. This helps us appear higher in searches, which means more people will find out about Auxoro. Other ways to help get the word out is telling a friend, tagging us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, writing a blog post, or supporting us with a donation on Patreon. We are a completely independent platform, and we're grateful for every listener who supports this podcast. Thanks for coming along for the ride, and I'll see you guys next time.